Hello everybody, my name is Quinn and welcome to my channel. If I sound a little weird, it's because I'm very sick, but I wanted to film these videos and get them up this week, so that's why I'm kind of pushing through it. But today we are talking about all the books that I read in the month of September and all the books that I read in the month of October. I didn't film a September wrap-up last month because I only read 2 books and they were pretty short, so I didn't think that it warranted an entire separate wrap-up for that, so I just kind of combined them. I read 2 books in the month of September, as I said, and then 6 books in the month of October. I was in quite a bit of a reading slump in the month of September, and if you want to learn more about why I feel like that was, you can watch my No TBR November video. So I'm going to start with the book that I liked the least this month and work up to the book that I liked the most this month. So let's just get started. The book that I gave 2 stars this month was Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia. I was really excited for this book because everyone on BookTube had been talking about it and everyone had been reviewing it, and I hadn't honestly heard one bad review of it, so I was very surprised that I disliked it, but also I feel like I have a very unpopular opinion of the book because I haven't seen anyone else with a similar opinion. I really liked the first half of this book. This book follows our main character Eliza, and she is one of the authors to a very, very popular webcomic series, but she is anonymous. And then the most famous webcomic writer, fanfiction writer, moves to her school and they kind of start a friendship that later grows into maybe something more. I really liked the first half of this book. I thought that the relationship between the main 2 characters was really great. I liked the discussion of fandom, but the second half of the book, I don't feel like personally it dealt with mental illness and especially suicidal thoughts, and I don't feel like the author even hints at that in the first half of the book, which I think can be very triggering for people who do have these conditions, and I just don't feel like it was dealt with very well. So the first half of the book was probably like a 3 or 4 stars. I could only give it 2 stars because I really did think that it was problematic towards the last half of the book. So sadly, I didn't like this book. Some people might not find it problematic, but I personally did, so yeah, 2 out of 5 stars. Now we're going to get into my 3-star reviews. The next was an audiobook that I had listened to, and that was The Obsession by Nora Roberts. I only really picked this up because it was on my mom's Audible account and I really needed something to listen to on my drive home, but I ended up not really liking this very much at all. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but there was just a lot of aspects that I thought were boring. I thought this book was going to be a thriller. It kind of starts off with our main character. She finds out something very horrible about her father, and then you follow kind of the aftermath of that, but also just her as an adult trying to settle into normal life. I thought this was going to be a thriller. It's really not a thriller. I really liked kind of like the first part of the book and then the last half of the book, but the middle half of the book was very boring. It was very domestic, and I'm not really at that point in my life where I care about stuff like that. It was just a lot of talk about her renovating her house, and it was just really boring. While I did enjoy some aspects of the book, I just didn't think it was anything special, so I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. The next book that I gave a 3 out of 5 stars was They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. Again, this was another book that had been so hyped up and that I just didn't feel lived up to the hype. I originally gave this 4 stars, but after thinking about this in comparison to everything else I read this month, I ended up knocking it down to 3 stars. The story follows our 2 main characters, Rufus and Mateo, and in this world there is a thing called Deathcast where you find out on the day you're going to die that you're going to die that day. You don't know how, but you know that you're going to die that day. So it's kind of your last day to get your affairs in order, to say your last goodbyes, everything like that. It's supposed to be like a more humane way to know that you're going to die and kind of solve more problems, but these 2 characters, under different circumstances, find themselves alone on their last day. So they go on this app called the Last Friend app and they find each other and spend their last day together. I thought that this book had a lot of good themes, and then it had a lot of really important points about loneliness and our place in the world and death and how we view death and how we view life, but I just don't think it was written in a way that I was emotionally connected to. I thought that the writing really lacked, but the ideas were really good. So while I did like some elements, the writing was just kind of blah for me. I don't know if I'm going to pick up any of his other books. I think that I would have to hear a really good review of one of them, but yeah, I only ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars for those reasons. Next, we are going to get into my 4-star reads, the first of those being The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee. I had actually heard Mackenzie Lee talk about this book at Boston Teen Author Festival, and she was so passionate about it and so passionate about the characters that I just feel like I had to pick it up. There's a lot of hype about this book, and I ended up really enjoying it. I was kind of hesitant because historical fiction isn't my thing, and I heard that there was magical realism in here, and I don't really like that, but it's more just like a fantastical element in this book, I would say. This story follows our main character as he goes on his grand tour of Europe. His father has kind of given him this ultimatum that if he doesn't become a gentleman, he will become disowned. There's a lot of LGBTQ rep in this book, and it's kind of just like an adventure tale. I liked this book. I really actually enjoyed it. I really loved the characters. I really liked the relationships between the characters. I really liked the setting, but I do feel like I wasn't very interested in the plot and what was happening plot-wise, so that was kind of the reason that I got 4 stars rather than 5 stars, but I am planning on continuing the series. I think the next book sounds really great because Felicity was one of my favorite characters in the book, so I think the next book is called Petticoats and Piracy, which just sounds really great. Felicity is kind of hinted at that she's asexual, so hopefully we explore that more. But yeah, I really love the characters in this book. I really love the relationships. I really love the diverse topics that it talks about and that it features a lot of diverse characters, and I'm really looking forward to the second book. The next 4-star book that I read was Miles Morales by Jason Reynolds. Again, I saw Jason Reynolds speak at Boston Teen Author Festival, and the way that he talked about this book immediately made me want to read it. It is based on the comics Miles Morales, but he said that he pretty much could build the character the way he wanted because there wasn't a lot of backstory on the character. So basically Miles Morales is a 16-year-old African-American Puerto Rican boy living in Brooklyn, and he goes to kind of like this elite private school, and he is Spider-Man, so at night he kind of tries to save people, kind of the whole Spider-Man thing. But what I really liked about this book was that it talks about more than just Spider-Man. It talks about systematic racism, what it's like being African-American in an elite private school, and kind of all of those issues about gentrification in such a small book. He really managed to pack a punch in such a small novel, and I really ended up enjoying it. I definitely want to read more from Ryan Reynolds. I think he has a really amazing writing style. I thought that this book was fun, but I also thought that it talked about a lot of important things. I definitely would recommend this book. I feel like no one has been really talking about it, and again, 4 out of 5 stars. And the last of my 4-star reads was Tower of Dawn by Sarah J. Maas. If you've been watching this channel, you know that I was very hesitant about this book because Chaol is one of my least favorite characters in the Throne of Glass series, and I was kind of hesitant about this book in particular because I didn't know if it was like necessary to the story, but Sarah J. Maas is calling this the 6th Throne of Glass book. I would say after reading this that you definitely need to read it in order to read the rest of the story. It follows Chaol, and this book is sort of the parallel book to Empire of Storms. It takes place during Empire of Storms, but it follows Chaol in his journeys in another part of the continent, so you get to see kind of another part of the world. I really enjoyed this book. I think Sarah J. Maas is such a good writer. I think that she does such a good job with romance and world building and really making you feel like you're in a fantasy setting. I think that Chaol was totally redeemed in this book and that you saw so much character growth from him and from someone who didn't really like him in the first couple of books. I think that she did a very nice job of kind of giving him that redemption arc. We were introduced to a lot of new characters that I really enjoyed. I really liked seeing another part of the world, and especially another part of that world that was diverse. The only thing that I think that this book suffered from, and that I've found in a lot of Sarah J. Maas's book, is pacing. I feel like we have like a lot of action in some parts and then it's kind of dull in others. And I also thought that Nesryn was a pretty flat and boring character until the end. I was much more interested in Chaol's perspective, which that was kind of disappointing, but I did really love the fantasy aspect. I really liked that we developed on this world, and I really liked all of the new things that we found out in this book. So I would give this book 4 out of 5 stars. I would definitely recommend it, and I would definitely say that you have to read it before the 7th and final book comes out, just because you do learn so much. It's going to be so crucial to the 7th book. And the second to last book in this wrap up, and my first 5-star read of this video, is The Husband's Secret by Liane Moriarty. I think I'm totally butchering that name and I don't know how to say it, but the story follows our main character Celia. Her husband is away on a business trip when she finds a letter addressed to her that says, "Open in the event of my death." She asks him about it and he's very sketchy about it, so she doesn't know what's in that letter, and it's kind of like a mystery that goes on from there. I wouldn't say that this is a thriller at all. I think if you go into it thinking it's a thriller, you're going to be a little disappointed. I really ended up being very surprised with how much I liked this book by the end. There were some parts that I was like, oh, I wish that it had maybe gone a different way, well, at that time, but then as I got to the end of the book, I realized why those decisions made so much sense. It's not a book where you're going to be like, oh, that's an amazing plot twist. If you're going into it looking for that, that's not what you're really going to find, but she is so good at writing characters. She is so good at writing morally gray characters. There are no good characters in this book. There are no bad characters in this book. It's really a book about life. I've seen a lot of reviews saying that the characters in this book are superficial, but characters in real life are superficial, and I just love how each of these characters has such a distinct voice and they all stand on their own, but all of their storylines weave in so expertly. I just think all of the character stories were so interesting, and as characters they were so compelling and their stories were so interesting. It was really the characters that made this book for me, but also she just weaves such an interesting storyline that's not thrilling, but it's just very interesting into the human condition, and I'm very excited to read more of her books. So I definitely gave this book 5 out of 5 stars, and I would definitely recommend it. And the last book that I'm going to talk about in this video, and my last 5-star read of the month, was actually an audiobook that I listened to, and that was Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. I wasn't planning on reading this book just because I really liked The Fault in Our Stars, but I hated Paper Towns. So I wasn't sure if I was going to like this book because I have such mixed feelings on John Green as an author. I kind of felt, luckily, the positive end of how I feel about John Green towards Turtles All the Way Down. Turtles All the Way Down follows our main character, Asa, and she suffers from obsessive compulsive disorder as well as an anxiety disorder. And John Green does such a good job at talking about OCD and anxiety. And I think that's partially because he has OCD and anxiety, so he really knows how to talk about that in an accurate way, but he doesn't romanticize it and he doesn't make it something that is beautiful. It's really something, it's hard to listen to and hard to read about sometimes because it does get so graphic and so real about what characters and what people with OCD really go through. The portrayal of anxiety and the idea of thought spirals and the fact that you can get lost in them was just so personal to me in particular, because that is something I really think about. I don't have OCD and I've never been diagnosed with anxiety, but when I have anxious thoughts, what he was saying resonated so heavily with me. And I think that if you can do that in any book, it's great. I would definitely recommend the audiobook because so much of this book is this character's internal thoughts and it's written in the first person, so hearing someone say that to you just adds a whole new layer to the book, and honestly, it's hard to listen to, so if you're not ready for that, I would wait until you are ready for that. It's one of my favorite books of the year, and it definitely deserves all the praise that it's been getting. And of course, 5 out of 5 stars. So these are all the books that I managed to read in September and October. I'm honestly really proud of myself considering the reading slump that I was in September. I am just so happy to be back on the reading track. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye guys.